Hello, welcome to our Friday video. So I'm going to walk us through a little bit about demand, consumer demand theory, and how that's connected to willingness to pay, which is going to be a central concept when we think about how much people value environmental amenities, whether we're talking about clean air or having blind cave shrimp in the bottom of Mammoth Cave. So as you may recall from an earlier economics class, we can think about an individual who is looking to buy slices of pizza, or let's do ice cream cones on a hot day. You've been out like exercising or having fun with friends in hot weather, and you come to an ice cream stand, and man, ice cream sounds really good. And so that first ice cream cone, you're willing to pay a lot of money for, maybe 15 bucks. So you're willing to pay a lot for the first ice cream cone. Now, you have that one, it's still hot, you're still, really excited about ice cream, you may be willing to pay 10 bucks for a second one. Third one, let's say about 5 bucks. Fourth one, you'd maybe be willing to pay 2 bucks. Fifth one, maybe $1. After that, you're not, these things aren't something you can just put in your pocket. It's going to melt. So you would be willing to pay maybe $1 for the fifth one. After that, even if they gave it to you, maybe if they gave it to you, you'd have another, but basically you're full now. So what have we done here? We just mapped out the willingness to pay for a different number of units at different prices. Well, we've just mapped out a demand curve, right? We've got price and we've got quantity, and we've mapped out this relationship. And so we drew bars showing willingness to pay at different discrete units of 1, 2, 3, 4. That's great, especially if you're thinking about an individual with something like a decision of how many pieces of pizza to buy or ice cream cones to buy. When we think about aggregating demand curves, we're not just looking at you wanting ice cream, we're looking at everyone wanting ice cream. We can end up thinking about it as much more this smooth curve to describe the relationship between price and quantity. Now, we may have a similar sort of, maybe this is 15 or 20 bucks up here. Not many people are willing to pay more than 15 or 20 bucks for an ice cream cone, suppose. But by the time we get down to, say, $1 or so, we're looking at much bigger quantities if we're looking at a lot of people. What we've done is we've added the quantities at each given price. We call it horizontal summation of individual demand curves to get this aggregate demand curve for ice cream cones. So now the way I usually think about it, it's possible to think of it other ways, but I usually think of it now as, okay, we've got different people along this demand curve. And so right here is that person who's, willing to spend, say, 20 bucks on an ice cream cone. That's someone who loves ice cream, who really wants ice cream right now. And somewhere down here along the demand curve, those are the people who are willing to pay 10 bucks for an ice cream cone. And so we've basically sorted people along this demand curve based on how much they would be willing to pay to have an ice cream. So that's going to be based on their preferences, right? What flavor of ice cream is it? Is it one that you love? Is it not? Are you hot right now? Is it a cold, rainy day? All those things will affect how much enjoyment you would get out of an ice cream, which is how much you'd be willing to pay to get one. So we've sorted people here. It gets a little bit more complicated because we talked about our example. You may have someone who's willing to pay 20 for the first and 15 for the second and 10 for the third. You could have the same person on the demand curve multiple times. I usually, for simplicity's sake, think of it as we've just sorted people based on people who prioritize it most, people who prioritize it least, and they're sorted along the curve there. So what does that tell us? This demand curve that you've all seen before in different classes, because in those classes you would have a demand curve, you would have a supply curve, you would end up with an equilibrium, right? This price and quantity at which the market clears, P star, Q star. Great. What do we want to have in mind? We want to be thinking about, okay, this person is willing to pay $15. The area underneath the demand curve, that is actually the height of the demand curve is measuring willingness to pay at that point on the demand curve for those people who are sorted into right there. So this person is willing to pay 20, this person's willing to pay 15, this person's willing to pay 10. And so what you may recall, if the market clearing price is say $10, well, this person is willing to pay more than that, so they do, and they get this extra enjoyment. They pay 10, they get 15 in enjoyment, they pay 10, so they have what we call surplus. And this person gets even more surplus because they value at 20, and this person gets a little surplus, and this person gets almost none. So looking where we are on the demand curve, all these people are getting surplus. The difference between what they would be willing to pay and what they actually have to pay in the market, well, that's based on the height of the demand curve, their willingness to pay for the product in general. So that's a relationship I want us to keep in mind. Think about a demand curve having people kind of sorted based on their willingness to pay. And so if we have a demand curve, and it's a pretty good approximation of what we think a market has going on with that relationship between price and quantity demanded, that means we actually have willingness to pay numbers for all the people that are sorted along that demand curve. So that's a good thing for us to keep in mind. We'll tie it to consumer surplus later. So we're going to turn next to producer. I'll have a short video, and then I'll direct you to a previously recorded video about the equal marginal principle, which is an important idea when it comes to the producer side of things, when we're building this economic foundation that we're going to use when looking at environmental topics. Thank you, guys.